The United States and China have a long and complicated trade relationship. For decades, the two economic giants have been locked in a cycle of disputes and negotiations. These tensions stem from a fundamental imbalance. The U.S. accuses China of unfair trade practices, such as intellectual property theft and currency manipulation. China, in turn, criticizes the U.S. for protectionist measures that harm its export-driven economy. The situation escalated significantly during the Trump administration. In 2018, Trump imposed tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. This marked the beginning of what became known as the trade war. China retaliated with tariffs of its own. The trade war dragged on for 2 years, creating uncertainty and volatility in global markets. A truce was eventually reached in early 2020. The Phase 1 trade deal saw China agree to increase purchases of U.S. goods. However, many of the underlying issues remained unresolved. The Biden administration inherited this fragile truce. While Biden initially focused on domestic issues, tensions with China continued to simmer. By 2024, it was clear that the trade war was far from over. The Biden administration maintained many of the Trump-era tariffs. It also imposed new tariffs on Chinese goods, citing concerns about unfair trade practices and human rights abuses. These actions set the stage for a new chapter in the U.S.-China trade conflict. A chapter that is likely to have far-reaching consequences for both countries and the global economy. In 2025, tensions between the U.S. and China reached a boiling point. Former President Donald Trump, who had returned to the White House after a 4-year hiatus, announced a new round of tariffs on Chinese goods. Trump, known for his aggressive trade policies, claimed that these measures were necessary to protect American jobs and intellectual property. The new tariffs, which ranged from 10 to 60%, targeted a wide range of Chinese products. These included electronics, machinery, and consumer goods. The tariffs were met with swift condemnation from China. Beijing accused the U.S. of violating international trade rules and undermining the global economic recovery. This second wave of tariffs marked a significant escalation of the trade war. It signaled a return to the confrontational approach that characterized Trump's first term. The move also reflected a broader shift in U.S. policy towards China, one that increasingly views China as a strategic competitor and economic threat. Trump's decision to reignite the trade war was met with mixed reactions. Some in the U.S. business community expressed concerns about the impact on supply chains and consumer prices. Others welcomed the move, arguing that it was long overdue. China wasted no time in responding to the U.S. tariffs. Beijing announced retaliatory tariffs on $21.2 billion worth of U.S. exports. The tariffs targeted key American industries including agriculture, energy, and manufacturing. This tit-for-tat exchange of tariffs further inflamed tensions between the two countries. However, China's response was not solely focused on retaliation. Beijing also took steps to mitigate the impact of the trade war on its own economy. The government implemented stimulus measures to boost domestic demand. It also sought to strengthen trade ties with other countries, including those in Southeast Asia and Europe. China's economic challenges extended beyond the trade war. The country was grappling with a slowing economy, a property market bubble, and a shrinking workforce. These internal challenges made it more difficult for Beijing to absorb the impact of U.S. tariffs. It also limited China's options for retaliating against the U.S. Despite these challenges, China remained defiant in the face of U.S. pressure. Beijing signaled its willingness to withstand a protracted trade war. It also demonstrated its ability to adapt to changing global trade dynamics. The trade war between the U.S. and China had profound implications for the global trading system. It accelerated the unwinding of globalization that had been underway for several years. As tariffs disrupted supply chains, companies began to rethink their reliance on China as a manufacturing hub. This led to a diversification of sourcing and production. Several countries benefited from this shift in global trade patterns. Vietnam and Mexico in particular emerged as alternative manufacturing destinations for companies seeking to avoid U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. This led to a surge in trade between these countries and the U.S. The trade war also had geopolitical implications. It deepened the rivalry between the U.S. and China, fueling tensions on issues ranging from Taiwan to technology. This rivalry reshaped alliances and partnerships around the world. Countries were increasingly forced to choose sides. The US, for its part, sought to strengthen ties with allies in Europe and Asia to counter China's growing influence. China, meanwhile, deepened its engagement with countries in the developing world, particularly through its Belt and Road Initiative. The economic consequences of the trade war were complex and far-reaching. The tariffs imposed by both the US and China led to higher prices and inflation. Supply chains were disrupted, causing shortages and increased costs. The trade war had mixed impacts on different US sectors. Steel and aluminum industries benefited, facing less competition. Agriculture and manufacturing were negatively affected. China's economy also felt the effects, slowing growth. The trade war impacted global trade and investment. The trade war between the US and China has entered a new and uncertain phase. The return of Trump to the White House suggests that the confrontational approach to trade is likely to continue. China, for its part, has shown its willingness to stand its ground and protect its interests. The future of the US-China trade relationship is difficult to predict. However, it is clear that the relationship will be shaped by a complex interplay of economic and geopolitical factors. The two countries are likely to remain locked in a strategic competition for global influence. Despite the tensions, there are also areas of potential cooperation between the US and China. Both countries have a shared interest in addressing global challenges such as climate change and pandemics. Cooperation in these areas could provide a basis for building trust and stabilizing the relationship. The future of the US-China trade relationship is of great consequence not only for the two countries involved but also for the global economy. The outcome of this rivalry will shape the rules of the global trading system and determine the contours of the international order for years to come.